When is one of the world's largest Bitcoin holders, Grayscale, going to stop selling Bitcoin? Just when we thought the worst of the GBTC selling was over, this week, Grayscale just saw over 30,000 Bitcoin leave their trust, the most amount since we saw in the week 3 of these Bitcoin ETFs trading all the way back in January. So who is responsible for this selling? Is it Genesis, or are there weak hands, weak-handed institutions trying to get out of the Bitcoin ETFs? Well, today I've got about 12 different charts to go through for you guys to hopefully tell this story. So let's start explaining what is happening now, and in particular, what is happening this week. Okay, we can see here that this chart is measuring the amount of GBTC sold per week by Grayscale. Okay, so we can see that this week there was about 30,000 Bitcoin that actually left the GBTC trust. This was the highest amount since the third week of the Bitcoin ETFs and when they were live. Okay, we can see the week 2 and week 3, we saw an enormous amount of GBTC selling. Okay, but now we obviously thought this was over. We thought that, you know, everybody who was going to sell GBTC had stopped selling GBTC. Most people remember that FTX sold about $1 billion worth of Bitcoin in the early days in week 2 and week 3. And since then, we've just seen this amount decline. But all of a sudden, it's picked back up again. So let's have a look at what could potentially be causing this, okay? So that's the first chart I want to show you. This one here is really cool because it's actually showing you the net flows, okay? So we can see that the only negative week of flows that we've seen was week number 3, okay? But now just recently, we've kind of broken a record that's not a record you want to break. And that is the fact that we've actually seen a significant amount of net outflows from the Bitcoin ETFs. We've seen 13,000 Bitcoin leave the ETFs, okay? In week 3, we saw 10,000 Bitcoin leave the ETFs. So, of course, this is noteworthy, something to keep an eye on. And this chart here is also one that kind of helps you visualize this because on the right-hand side of the chart, it's showing you the recent decline in the amount of Bitcoin in these ETFs overall. So this is looking at the total amount. And we can see we've pretty much only seen up only. Okay, since the ETFs have been live, we've only experienced up only. Okay, in regards to the price, the Bitcoin price has rallied from like 49K to 74-ish K, and the same with the ETFs. And many people have kind of been speculating about the fact of what are these institutions going to do when the price of Bitcoin declines, okay? Well, we can see here that many people are using the recent data to say that institutions are weak hands. They're selling Bitcoin ETFs. We're going to explain why that is potentially not the case in a moment, but I just have a couple more charts that helps visualize the recent decline. So again, this one here shows that we saw selling this week nearly every single day by the Bitcoin ETFs. And then if we move on, this is another chart that shows you something similar. On Friday, the last day, we actually saw that the GBTC outflow was beginning to slow, which is interesting. And why is this? Well, I think this article here is going to help to tell us the story of what's actually happening with these ETF products. I'm going to try to zoom up and make that really big for you guys. But we can see GBTC outflows top 358 million, but one theory suggests it's almost over, okay? So what is the theory? Well, the theory is that this recent wave of selling of the Bitcoin ETFs is due to Genesis. Okay, so we can see here that this article says the latest figures bring this week's total outflows for GBTC to 1.8 billion and mark the 5th consecutive day of outflows across all the 10 ETFs. Okay, we can see here that there's this really cool tweet here by ErgoBTC, and he's showing that Genesis is back from the dead, taking down more than 16.8 thousand BTC in the last few weeks to 2 new addresses. So this represents around $1.1 billion worth of selling. So again, how much outflows have we seen in the past week? We've seen about $1.8 billion of outflows this week. So again, Genesis got approved to actually sell what I believe was about $1.5 billion of outflows. Okay. So again, everybody's speculating that the recent uptick in the GBTC selling is because of Genesis. It really is that simple. But how much more do they have to sell? Are they going to continue dumping Bitcoin on the market? Well, let's take a look here, because we can see here that they don't have a whole bunch of Bitcoin. Okay, Genesis only has $1.5 or $2 billion worth of Bitcoin. So we can see, we continue scrolling down this article. There's another couple of other nuggets I want to hit here. On a March 19th statement from Genesis, said that the firm would be returning assets to creditors in kind, meaning that the defunct lender would be selling GBT shares for Bitcoin. Okay, so this is interesting because this kind of theory is suggesting, okay, we're seeing a lot of outflows from GBTC, but why is the price of Bitcoin not absolutely cratering? Okay, the price of Bitcoin's just kind of been chopping around sideways all week, despite this massive amount of selling from GBTC and the other 9 Bitcoin spot ETFs not actually able to outpace the selling. Okay, why is price not going down? Well, this theory in this article here is suggesting that because Genesis has to return the Bitcoin to its customers in kind, that's that terminology, that means that they have to sell the GBTC shares and buy the physical Bitcoin. Okay, so this is potentially why the price is not actually dumping, despite the fact we have these really big, really scary looking charts of GBTC selling increasing. Okay, so again, this article is a really cool one because it kind of helps to explain what is going on in the space. So it also says on Feb 14th, Genesis received approval from a US court to begin liquidating its $1.3 billion worth of GBT shares in a bid to repay its creditors. Okay, so there's the magic number that I forgot to mention specifically earlier in the live stream. 1.3 billion is how much they've got. And we can see here by this tweet by ErgoBTC earlier in the week, 1.1 billion has already moved. Okay, so again, this is kind of suggesting that maybe the Bitcoin price is clear for new record highs as GBTC outflows drop to $170 million. Okay, again, nobody knows where the price of Bitcoin is going. We don't really care about that too much here on the channel. Price is kind of irrelevant. But again, everybody is now speculating that last week could have been the worst week when it came to the GBTC flows. And we can see, we are going to see in a minute by watching this video, but we can see that a secret whale, Mr. 100, is back buying Bitcoin again. Okay, we're going to have a look at the on-chain data for this one in a second, but I want to first play a video I have prepared for you guys from Marathon Digital Holdings CEO Fred Thiel, who's obviously talking about the Bitcoin ETFs. So I'm going to play the first minute of this one. I'm going to jump in and give you guys some thoughts.
Volatile ride for Bitcoin after hitting an all-time high of more than $73,000 last week. Joining us exclusively to discuss the recent highs and lows is Fred Thiel, CEO and chairman of Marathon Digital Holdings. Fred, it's great to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I'm going to start right there. This incredible torrid rally that we've seen in Bitcoin, what's spurring it and how much of this hinges on the upcoming halving?
Well, I think most of this has been the pent-up demand for the ETF. You had some rotation out of miners into the ETF. A lot of these ETFs haven't even really started marketing their products to wealth advisors. You have very few wealth advisors that actually are recommending it to their clients yet. So we've yet to see the real kind of flow from alternative assets and just retirement accounts, pension accounts into Bitcoin. That will come most probably later this year, early next year. But I think right now what you've seen is a rotation. At the same time, you're seeing people looking at the economy, what's going on, uncertainty in the world, and just some jitters. The other thing.
So I think Fred makes a great point here. Okay, the real flows of the Bitcoin ETFs haven't even begun yet. Okay, and that's kind of my base case right now. I don't think the real flows for the ETFs have even started. I think, and what's interesting is this kind of gets into the question of what's going to happen when the big flows really start? Well, I think what we're going to see is just not much GBTC selling at the time. So we can see by this purple chart here, the GBTC currently holds about 348,000 Bitcoin. So we can see this other chart here is really cool because the light blue is measuring the amount of Bitcoin held by the GBTC trust. Okay, so we can see that this has been getting smaller and smaller as a percentage of the overall Bitcoin held in all of these other Bitcoin spot ETFs. So again, this is kind of like, this is interesting. This is kind of related to what was on the thumbnail of today's video. How many days left are there before we're all of a sudden left with no GBTC selling and all of the inflows coming in are just going to have to, it's going to have to go out there and find Bitcoin on exchanges, rip the Bitcoin off the exchanges, and what's going to happen to the price. Price is going to go up. So if we continue seeing the same amount of GBTC outflows, it means that we're probably so right now we're about 2 months into this Bitcoin ETF trend, and GBTC has sold, if I show you the original tweet we were looking at, GBTC has sold over 200,000 Bitcoin. Okay, so right now they're left with 347,000 Bitcoin. So that means we're 2 months into trading. So that means in about 3.5-ish months, again, they were quick maths on top of my head in this live stream, we're going to be left with 0 Bitcoin held by GBTC. Okay, now again, this is very interesting. This is less than 100 days of potential sell pressure left in these Bitcoin ETFs. So what's going to happen when we go back to this interview here? If Fred, the CEO of one of the largest public Bitcoin mining operations, thinks the rest of the flows are going to actually increase from here, what's it going to do to price if the real flows happen in the latter half of the year and there's no selling happening at the same time? I think that's what's kind of interesting about all of this kind of GBTC fear porn that is going on right now, because I've actually been reached out by a couple of people this week. They've reached out and said, oh, GBTC, they're selling all of this Bitcoin. Does this mean, BlackRock's now dumping on Bitcoin? A lot of people have this belief that, BlackRock's just kind of getting into Bitcoin and using retail as like exit liquidity. And like, this is the top of Bitcoin. Like there's a lot of people who genuinely believe that. So that's why we're doing a video on the Bitcoin ETF flows this week. As much as I don't like to talk about the ETF flows, because honestly, doesn't interest me that much. The same with the price. Price doesn't really interest me that much with Bitcoin. But again, let's continue listening to this interview here with old Freddy boy, Fred Teal from Marathon, because there's another interesting little nugget I want to talk about in a second.
Thing that the ETFs now hold a very large amount of Bitcoin. And so there's not a lot of liquidity in the market. So any move one way or another is causing a lot of volatility, which over time will just normalize, because as the market cap of these ETFs and the Bitcoin overall continues to grow, volatility will decrease and it'll operate more like a traditional asset. But we have a while to go before we get there.
I don't think that's true. I don't think the ETFs are going to make Bitcoin less volatile. He says that Bitcoin's going to be more volatile for a while. Okay, it's not going to be for a while until the Bitcoin volatility is actually suppressed. I actually think it's probably 5 years away. I think Bitcoin volatility is going to continue to increase for a long, long time. And obviously, if Bitcoin volatility is going to only be increasing by now, for I think at least the next 5 years, that means all of your fancy models like the Bitcoin power law are all going to be broken to the upside. I'm going to talk about the power law in a second because that's been triggering me a little bit lately. But let's play a little bit more of this interview with Fred.
Okay, and as we mentioned, we have a while to go, and we do have this halving that's coming up. But I wonder, halving, is this going to be good or bad for Marathon? I guess more specifically, what does it do to the mining market, and how do you position yourself for it?
Yeah, great question. So what this does to the mining market is essentially creates a situation where some miners will be under stress. If you think about the mining market in this cycle compared to prior cycles, there hasn't been available credit or an ability for easy access to capital or equipment financing for the non-public miners. And of the public miners, only really the larger miners have had the opportunity to raise capital. And so there's been this race of the large miners growing, scaling very rapidly, and the smaller miners not. So post-halving, I think you'll see the smaller miners come under stress, financial stress, which will enable the bigger miners to consolidate the industry. And we've certainly been very focused on that. We've recently done 2 acquisitions, and we're going to keep acquiring. We have quite a strong balance sheet. We're ready to go. as opportunities arise. But you have to be very prudent. You have to do these things at the right prices. And I think the more stuff will come to market post-halving.
Okay. And it raises the question, how quickly can you build your own capacity to meet forecasts? And perhaps just as importantly,
so I think Fred said something interesting about interest rates there that I want to hit on, okay? Such that, interest rates have been so high recently, this has meant it's been more difficult for people to get access to credit, in particular the smaller miners. If interest rates are dropped in the US and around the world, what's that going to do to the miners? Does that mean we're going to see an even more parabolic chart of the Bitcoin hash rate that already is like vertical? It looks like this. It's absolutely ridiculous. Is that going to become even more vertical if interest rates are lowered? I did see today that Switzerland, I think even Paraguay, and there was another couple of countries that began lowering interest rates this week. Okay. And again, this is kind of asking the question, when is the Fed going to pivot? Jerome Powell's already kind of admitted that, that a pivot is coming. So when is that going to happen? And is that going to actually help, these Bitcoin miners potentially put more hash rate online? Okay. John Gammon says here, I'm triggered off that Giovanni Power Law too. G'day, Jay Jason. Hope you're doing well. Volatility should decrease as market cap increases. We've got a regular here, McLovin, asking a very interesting question. Now, I actually strongly disagree with this, because I think, yes, market cap is increasing, and yes, it's taking more and more capital to give Bitcoin these very high returns. But I think what everybody forgets to look at is the sell side. Obviously it's going to take more and more demand to make Bitcoin do 100x like it did in 2013. But when you have less supply than we did 10 years ago on the market available for sale, I actually see volatility increasing in the future. And I don't think we're going to see these, theories of diminishing returns in the future, just because what happens when the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges hit zero? Well, I think volatility is going to increase both to the upside and to the downside. Okay. Again, I'm not saying this is just a one-way trade and this is all just everything's bullish for Bitcoin. It is. Everything is bullish for Bitcoin. But I think we're going to be in a very, very interesting state when the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges does hit zero. And at this rate, that should happen in around 2027, 2028, which is going to be very, very interesting. But let's move on here. I've seen enough of Fred. I just really wanted to pick on him for his takes on the volatility, and I did think it was interesting. He was talking about credit, but let's talk a little bit more about Mr. 100. So most people would know that is the secret whale who's pretty much been buying 100 Bitcoin every single day. We can see here Hodl15 Capital, who's a great Twitter account, definitely worth a follow. Credit where credit is due. Is always tracking the on-chain data. So he's showing, he or she, I don't know who it is, Hodl15 Capital is showing that this entity, Mr. 100, has bought $120 million worth of Bitcoin the past 2 days. Absolutely incredible. I can see a comment here at the very top. Must be Sailor or Saudis. I think that's a pretty great. Take too. I think it certainly could be the Saudis, and we've done videos talking about why Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar are all kind of speculating about Bitcoin, which is very, very, very interesting. Again, okay, so power law. This is going to be fun when I release a power law video this week. It might trigger some of you guys. I just think, again, power law doesn't actually factor into the equation that Bitcoin has a shrinking supply. It only factors into equation price. Okay, it doesn't actually. It has all of these cute models like, price is a t to the power 3 power law, and hash rate is a t to the power 12. Power law, so to say. But you actually see in none of these power law maths or projections, none of them actually factor in the fact that Bitcoin's supply is shrinking and Bitcoin's only been adopted by 0.5% of the world today. What happens when the other 99.5% of the world want to adopt Bitcoin? Again, I haven't seen the power law address any of these questions. I am going to talk about that more at length in another video. But again, I want to finish off here with the ETF guru, Eric Balkunas. He's saying here that the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF and Fidelity's ETF have now taken in cash for 49 days straight, something only 30 other ETFs have ever done in history. okay, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. And again, this is a reminder that nobody's selling the BlackRock or the Fidelity ETFs this week just because we've had, a lot of selling from GBTC. Nobody's paper handing their BlackRock Bitcoin ETFs. We can see here, Eric says it's pretty wild that IBIT now accounts for over half of BlackRock's total net flows this year. Okay, incredible. And so far, the IBIT Bitcoin ETF has taken in double any of their other 420 ETFs have, which is honestly incredible. And it kind of shows you that, there's a massive demand for these Bitcoin ETF products. Absolutely huge demand. Now, again, we got I think BTC Moon Guys says it nicely. All your models are destroyed. Mr. 100 could be BlackRock. Certainly could be. Mr. 100 actually began accumulating Bitcoin way back in 2023. So again, some people have speculated, is this BlackRock? Others have speculated, is this a nation state? I might do a video diving deep down the rabbit hole of who this could be in the future. But we got a lively live chat here. At $100,000, 5 million coins will be sent to the exchanges. Nick, my friend, that's a very interesting comment. Because I hate to disagree, but I have to disagree with that. I mean, why do I say that? Well, when the price of Bitcoin rallied from $3,000 to $69,000 in under 18 months in our last bull market, you would think there'd been a lot of people selling Bitcoin and sending it to exchanges. We only saw 150,000 coins sent to exchanges. Okay, it sounds like a lot, 150,000 coins, but it's nowhere near 5 million, and it's a lot less than what we used to see in previous bull markets. So I think there was like 1 million coins sent to exchanges in 2017 and about 500,000 sent in the 2013 bull market. In the previous bull market, we only saw 150,000. Again, I just think it's an interesting data point that kind of says, has something changed? Are more, strong holders and strong hands actually holding on to Bitcoin and they're not going to be selling it at, $100,000 a coin? I don't think so. I don't think $100,000 a coin is a price that interests a lot of people. Okay. So we've got, what the hell do these math PhDs and physicists know about math? That's right. Freddy Krueger, he's a math PhD. But in none of the analysis about the Bitcoin power law have I seen the equation or the variable of supply addressed. So again, very interesting. Plan B was, he was an XYZ, trading quant, trading expert, wasn't he, when the stock to flow was propagated in 2020? But obviously that model lasted, 2 years, 3 years? And it completely blew up, and it's now a joke. We have some legends in the chat as well. We have Denver Hoddle, great Bitcoiner. We've got Erickson in the chat. We got Johnny Midas, another regular in the chat. GBTC is old and they are selling. Yep, true. Holy cow, ETFs are just getting started. 100% true. Now, okay, let's take a look at something interesting. Yeah, I think 100K is a little bit low. I don't think there's going to be many people selling Bitcoin at $100,000. That is just my controversial opinion, okay? I actually expect, these entities here to be still accumulating Bitcoin heavily at $100,000. Again, we got MicroStrategy, 214,000 Bitcoin. There, Michael Saylor's already said that he's going to be buying at absolutely any price. He doesn't care about price of Bitcoin. He's going to be continuing to accumulate. The same with GBTC. The same with FBTC, Fidelity, and BlackRock. These people actually buying the ETFs, they look like long-term sticky money. Okay, I don't think that they're going to be selling. And you have to ask yourself the question: what are the exchanges going to do when there's no Bitcoin on exchanges and you have someone like BlackRock and Fidelity knocking on your door saying, okay, I've just got an order for 2,000 Bitcoin today, like they've been getting for the past 2 months. Where am I going to get the Bitcoin from? Okay, I don't think a lot of people have thought about what happens when there's no Bitcoin on exchanges. Well, I'm sad to say it, but I don't think little retail plebs like you and I are going to be getting Bitcoin before BlackRock. So again, this is a periodical reminder, not your keys, not your coins. If you don't have Bitcoin in self-custody, you don't have Bitcoin. It's as simple as that, okay? That is the revolution. The revolution is taking self-custody of Bitcoin. If we all bought spot ETF products, well, guess what's going to happen? Paper Bitcoin is going to get spun up on top of it. The same thing that happened to gold over the past 50 to 100 years. I just whacked my microphone there. I hope it's still working. So again, take self-custody of your Bitcoin. If you're having trouble, if you can't take self-custody of your Bitcoin, I can help you. I can, hook you guys up. I work with the Bitcoin advisors. So as you can see, I've got my calendar here. If you need help taking custody of your Bitcoin, or if you need help setting up a collaborative custody Bitcoin multi-signature setup, I can help with all of that. So again, reach out. We do have a ton of free resources, free content, free tutorials that can help you to do it. But if you do need your hand held, there's a fee associated, but we can help you guys get your Bitcoin off exchanges and set up a collaborative custody multi-signature setup. And if BTC Moon Guy is correct, nobody's going to be selling at 0.1 M Bitcoin. You might want a more secure Bitcoin setup, okay? Not saying multi-signature is better than single signature. I'm saying that it's a great option to have, and it's something that I have. I have multiple different setups, and I don't want to say too much about my security online, but I think it's great to have multiple different setups and a distributed, geographically distributed, collaborative custody setup with multi-sig is a great option. So again, we've got people talking about lettuce hands in the chat. Lettuce hands are going to be crying at the next cycle. Couldn't agree more. One day, the privilege of access to Bitcoin won't be available to the normie. Could not agree more, Hamza. I think that's a great note to end today's live stream on. We are blessed that today we are talking about Bitcoin on a Sunday night at 7:42 p.m. local time, and Bitcoin adoption right now is 0.5%, and the price of Bitcoin is 0.064 M. Okay, imagine that. If we look back on this video in 10 years time, it's going to be absolutely crazy, just how early all of us are today. So again, if you think we're early in Bitcoin, Dexter Wales says a multi-sig for the win, only option for long-term generational storage. I think it's potentially the best option for long-term generational storage. Again, I have a biased opinion in this, but I do think it is. I do think it is the best, long-term option for generational storage. As simple as that. So again, I'm going to end today's live stream there, guys. I've been going for a little bit long today. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. With all that said, I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next live stream.